This is a review for using the quadratic formula. We use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. I have up here ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. In order to use the quadratic formula, the equation must be set equal to 0. The formula is in this box. You must memorize this formula. The formula to solve for x in a quadratic equation is x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The values of a, b, and c come from the quadratic equation. The a is the value in front of x squared, the b is the value in front of x, and c is the constant. Let's solve this equation for x. We will give an exact answer in simplified form and give an approximation to the nearest two decimal places. Here we have 4x squared minus x minus 1 equals 0. This is our value for a, part of that quadratic term. The value for b would be negative 1. The value for c would be the constant negative 1. So we have x is equal to negative b. B is already a negative 1, so it's negative negative b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. We want to give the exact answer in simplified form. Minus minus 1 would be a positive 1, plus or minus the square root, negative 1 squared would be 1, negative 4 times a positive 4 times a negative 1 would be a positive 16, all of that divided by 8. 1 plus 16 would give us 17, all of that divided by 8. This would be the exact form of our answer. So this is our exact simplified answer. Now we would like to find an approximation of these two answers. One of our answers is 1 plus the square root of 17 divided by 8, and then one of our answers is 1 minus the square root of 17 divided by 8. I would like to find an approximation for the square root of 17. I'll type into my calculator the square root of 17, and the value that I get is approximately 4.12 when I round to the nearest two decimal places. So our approximation would be 1 plus 4.12. Remember, I'm using my calculator to figure out approximately that the square root of 17 is 4.12. And I will put that in place of the square root of 17 in my exact answer. I will add 1 plus 4.12. I will divide that by 8. And I get 0.64. My second answer is 1 minus the square root of 17, so that would be 1 minus 4.12, and I will also divide that by 8. When I do 1 minus 4.12 and then divide by 8 in my calculator, the value that I get is negative 0.39. Let's try another one. I would like to solve this using the quadratic formula. In order to use the quadratic formula, I must bring all terms to one side and have the equation set equal to 0. So I will have 3x squared minus 6x. When I bring that to the other side, it becomes a positive 1. Same thing as adding 1 to both sides. The value of a is the number in front of the quadratic term. The value of b would be the number in front of the linear term, and the value of c would be the constant. So we get x is equal to negative b, and b is a minus 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c, all of this divided by 2 times a. We want to write this in the simplified form. Negative negative 6 would be a positive 6, plus or minus the square root. Negative 6 squared would be 36, Minus 4 times a positive 3 times a positive 1 will be a negative 12. And then we're going to divide all of that by 2 times 3, which is 6. (36 minus 12) would be 24. All of that divided by 6. This is not quite in the simplified form, as when I look at the square root of 24, we notice that there is a perfect square underneath the square root. 24 is 4 times 6. We can take the square root of 4 and bring that out to the front of the square root. So that would be 2 times the square root of 6. So now our answer is x is equal to 6 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 6, all of that divided by 6. So I replace the square root of 24 with the simplified version, 2 times the square root of 6. Lastly, I would like to reduce the common factors within the fraction. If all of these outside numbers, all of the numbers outside of the square roots are divisible by the same thing, then I can divide them all by that same value. So I will divide them all by 2. So my final simplified exact answer would be 3 plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 times the square root of 6 is square root of 6. And then in the denominator, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this is our final simplified exact answer. If I wish to find the approximation rounded to the nearest 2 decimal places, then I will figure out what is the square root of 6 in my calculator. In my calculator, I got approximately 2.45. So 3 plus or minus 2.45 divided by 3 will be how I will find my approximations. So I put into my calculator the square root of 6, and I find that that answer is approximately 2.45 rounded to the nearest 2 decimal places. So we will do 3 plus 2.45 approximately divided by 3, and we will do 3 minus 2.45 divided by 3, and we will find that approximation as well. So our 2 approximate answers would be 1.82 and then also 0.18. You should be able to find both the exact and the approximate answers. Now it's time for you to try a few problems. Pause the video and try these 2 problems. Solve using the quadratic formula. 5x squared plus x equals 2, and then also x squared minus 2x minus 6 equals 0. Pause the video, try them, and then see if your final answer is correct.